story is like an onion. It has tons of layers. And also it made me cry. Or maybe that's just the onion metaphor. Why did Charles Dickens layer craft move after craft move into such a short story? That's exactly what we are here to find out. Today's mission is to analyze how Dickens layers craft moves to create themes and how narrative perspective shapes those craft moves and the reader's experience of the story. Let's step into Dickens' eerie short story, The Signal Man, and see exactly how he does it. You may know Charles Dickens as the author of A Christmas Carol, but many of his other works explored the struggles of ordinary people in a rapidly changing world. The Signal Man is no exception. In fact, it reflects some of Dickens' personal fears about industrialization and its human cost. The story was partly inspired by a traumatic experience in Dickens' own life, surviving the Staplehurst rail crash in 1865, an event that left a lasting psychological impact. But the fear in The Signal Man isn't Dickens alone. It taps into widespread Victorian anxieties about industrial progress and the dangers of modern technology. The tale blends Gothic elements of isolation, mystery, and ghostly warnings with a very modern unease about machines, fate, and the systems people are powerless to control. Told from the perspective of an unnamed first-person narrator, the story reveals only what this narrator sees, hears, and thinks. This limited perspective directly affects the mood of the story, while also allowing Dickens to weave in other craft moves that build toward the story's haunting theme. Let's see how this point of view shapes Dickens' use of craft moves. We begin the story with the narrator encountering a signalman, or a railroad worker responsible for operating signals and switches. The narrator spots him on the tracks and begins walking down a path alongside a hill to meet him. When I came down low enough upon the zigzag descent to see him again, I saw that he was standing between the rails on the way by which the train had lately passed, in an attitude as if he were waiting for me to appear. He had his left hand at his chin, and that left elbow rested on his right hand, crossed over his breast. His attitude was one of such expectation and watchfulness that I stopped a moment, wondering at it. So far, we just have our narrator wandering down the side of a hill and observing the signalman standing on the tracks. But even in this scene, Dickens is really setting the emotional atmosphere for his story. How does the first-person perspective of the story create the mood the reader experiences? By writing in first person, Dickens allows readers to experience the moment through the narrator's personal perception, which creates a feeling of uncertainty and unease. The narrator doesn't fully understand what he's seeing. The signalman's posture is strange, and his watchfulness causes the narrator to pause in confusion. Because we only see what the narrator sees and feel what he feels, we are drawn into his sense of quiet discomfort. Let's keep reading to see how Dickens builds on this feeling to create a theme. As you listen, notice how Dickens uses imagery to describe the tunnel that the train tracks go into. I resumed my downward way, and stepping out upon the level of the railroad and drawing nearer to him, saw that he was a dark, sallow man, with a dark beard and rather heavy eyebrows. His post was in as solitary and dismal a place as I ever saw. On either side, a dripping wet wall of jagged stone, excluding all view but a strip of sky. The perspective one way, only a crooked prolongation of this great dungeon, the shorter perspective in the other direction terminating in a gloomy red light, and the gloomier entrance to a black tunnel in whose massive architecture there was a barbarous, depressing, and forbidding air. So little sunlight ever found its way to this spot that it had an earthy, deadly smell, and so much cold wind rushed through it that it struck chill to me, as if I had left the natural world. Whoa! This is starting to get pretty spooky. Dickens uses a metaphor when he describes the tunnel the signalman stands in front of as a great dungeon. But look at the details layered around that metaphor. The setting is solitary and dismal. There is a gloomy red light and a black tunnel. The architecture feels barbarous, depressing, and forbidding. The air smells earthy and deadly, and the narrator feels as though he has left the natural world. Dickens is layering craft moves to create a mood of dread and unease. The metaphor makes the setting feel frightening and claustrophobic, but the vivid sensory imagery pushes deeper, suggesting that the tunnel is more than just a gloomy place. So it seems likely that Dickens is using this tunnel as a symbol. What does the tunnel symbolize, and why do you think that? Pause to work. There's lots of ways to interpret this, but I'm starting to think the tunnel symbolizes death. Everything about it, the darkness, the stillness, the cold, feels like a space between worlds or an entrance to the unknown. Dickens uses this symbol to begin establishing the haunting presence of death that lingers throughout the story. So we've identified two craft moves here: the narrative perspective and the use of symbolism. And of course, these moves don't happen separately. They're woven together in the story. How do they impact each other? We know that Dickens' use of first-person perspective limits us to the narrator's thoughts and observations, so we share in his confusion and unease. Because he doesn't fully understand what's happening, neither do we. At the same time, the tunnel becomes a symbol of death. Described as a great dungeon filled with gloom and silence, it suggests not just a place, but a passage into the unknown. How does Dickens use perspective and symbolism together to create a theme? Pause your video and jot your thoughts. Dickens' choice of first-person point of view makes us feel the narrator's uncertainty and unease, while the tunnel symbolizes the cause of that fear: death. The perspective gives us the feeling, and the symbol reveals what's behind it. Together, the narrator's limited perception and the tunnel's symbolism create a theme about the fear of death or the unknown. Phew! We've peeled back this onion, and I'm wondering if it's not a little rotten. Layer after layer revealed fear, isolation, and the limits of human understanding, all wrapped in stacked craft moves. Keep reading to see what's up with this signalman and discover more of Dickens' haunting themes. Hey, hey.